the rise of Hitler, 9/11 terrorist attacks, the government forcing everyone to eat fish. You may be aware of Nostradamus' more famous predictions, but are you ready for a future that includes the government dictating your diet, a war with genetically modified humans, or the sun disappearing from the sky? Believe it or not, these may be the next of Nostradamus' prophecies to come true. Join us as we examine the man who some claim has predicted the future and how these predictions may shape the world in the years to come. Before we dive into upcoming prophecies, like a pescatarian future reminiscent of George Orwell's dystopian novel 1984, we need to discuss who Nostradamus was, what he did, and why some people are so adamant that he is a prophet. In 1503, Michel de Nostradamus was born in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence, France, to a prosperous family. Due to the ideological climate of the time, Michel's grandfather made the difficult choice of turning his back on his Jewish familial heritage and converting to Christianity. This was done to keep the ruling class from stripping them of everything they owned. At this point, the family name was also changed, from Garçonnet to Nostradam, meaning Our Lady, a reference to the Virgin Mary. At 14 years old, Michel de Nostradamus was admitted into the University of Avignon to study medicine. However, the student population was sent home due to the bubonic plague outbreak. Michel did not return to his family. Instead, he took the time to travel around the countryside, working as an apothecary to research herbal medicines and folk remedies. Sometime between 1522 and 1529, he entered the University of Montpellier to finish his studies and eventually receive his doctorate in medicine. Much to the chagrin of his teachers, many of whom were Catholic priests, Michel de Nostradamus was enthralled with astrology. University officials went as far as trying to expel Nostradamus from the school when they found out that he had worked as an apothecary before coming to the university. Some sources claimed that they succeeded in doing this, while others said that Michel was allowed to finish his schooling and eventually received his license to practice medicine, although this was not the same as having a medical degree. Approximately 30 years after his graduation in 1550, Michel de Nostradamus would Latinize his name upon publishing his first almanac. This is likely the first time Nostradamus was seen in print. Nostradamus may have dabbled in astrology and the occult, but by many accounts he was also a devout Christian. Even still, Nostradamus was not afraid to speak his mind and was accused of heresy by the church in the 1530s for his critical views. Many years later, Nostradamus declared himself a true and faithful Christian on his deathbed and even willed some of his money to several religious orders. After being accused of heresy, Nostradamus was ordered to appear at a church inquisition, which could have only ended badly for him, so he decided to flee France and travel to faraway lands. Nostradamus spent time in Italy, Greece, and Turkey. During these travels, he was introduced to different schools of thought and dove deeper into the occult. By 1547, Nostradamus had returned to France, believing that enough time had passed since his run-in with the Inquisition. He once again began treating plague victims around the southern part of the country. During this time, he met a wealthy widow named Anne Ponsard, and the two were married not long after. Nostradamus and Anne had 6 children together. Once he had settled back in France, Nostradamus published 2 books. The first was a translation of Galen, a Roman physician. The other was titled Traité de Fardamon and was a book on cosmetics and food preservation. However, even as Nostradamus wrote about medicine, he was diving farther and farther into the occult. Nostradamus would meditate for hours on end, which he claimed would put him in a trance where visions would tell him of future events. However, Nostradamus would never consider himself a prophet. Instead, he viewed himself as a scientist. Between 1549 and 1550, Nostradamus wrote his first almanac, using his acquired knowledge of astrology and mysticism, coupled with his meditation practices. He made several meteorological and celestial predictions for the coming year with what appeared to be stunning accuracy. Merchants and farmers even used them to make decisions on when to travel and what to expect while on the road. The popularity of his almanacs drove Nostradamus to keep writing more and more prophecies, and over the years his predictions grew in numbers and scope. With his popularity and notoriety increasing, Nostradamus began to gain enemies. Rival astrologers and scientists considered his work amateurish. However, this didn't dissuade many wealthy and influential people from around France from buying into the prophecies that Nostradamus was publishing. In 1555, Nostradamus completed what many considered his magnum opus, Les Prophecies. This was a series of poetic quatrains and stanzas with 4 lines, laid out in 10 groups of 100. These groups were known as centuries, which only referred to the number of quatrains in each section and didn't correspond to actual centuries. This would later pose problems when Nostradamus' interpreters tried to connect certain predictions to future dates. as Nostradamus never provided specific years for his prophecies. The vagueness around time also allowed people to cherry-pick different prophecies to fit certain events. Regardless of these clear problems with Nostradamus' work, Catherine de' Medici, then the queen consort of King Henry II of France, hired Nostradamus to create a series of horoscopes for her children. Many aristocrats and people of power asked Nostradamus to predict their futures, even if what he foretold was vague and shrouded in symbolism. On July 1st or 2nd, 1566, Nostradamus died of natural causes at the ripe old age of 62. True to his character, Nostradamus was believed to have written an entry in his final almanac predicting his own death about a year before it happened. As the year progressed, Nostradamus began to put his affairs in order. In June 1566, he met with his lawyer to finalize his will, leaving most of his estate to his wife and children. The evening before his passing, Nostradamus' secretary, Jean de Chavigny, claimed that the prophet told him, "You will not find me alive at sunrise." The next morning, Nostradamus was discovered dead in his bed. Before analyzing Nostradamus' prophecies for our own future, we'll look at some of his past predictions that allegedly have already come true. This is necessary to help us interpret the quatrains that we'll examine to show how things could get very strange within the next decade. We'll present you with a quatrain with which you can try to guess the associated historical event. As you're about to find out, sometimes this is easier said than done. Historical Event 1. The blood of the just will be lacking in London, burnt up in the fire of 66. The ancient lady will topple from her high place. Many of the same sect will be killed. Nostradamus interpreters attribute this quatrain to the Great Fire of London. On September 2, 1666, a small blaze began in Thomas Farriner's bakery on Pudding Lane. The fire engulfed the bakery and quickly spread through the closely packed buildings of the city. The fire blazed for 3 days and destroyed approximately 373 acres within the walls of London, along with an additional 63 acres outside the walls. The fire ended up burning down approximately 13,200 houses and 87 churches. Many attribute this quatrain to the Great Fire because of the line "burnt up in the fire of 66", since that is the year that the Great Fire occurred. It's also been hypothesized that the blood of the just might refer to the incineration of millions of flea-carrying rats that had spread the Black Death in the centuries prior. Historical Event 2. Songs, chants, and demands will come from the enslaved, held captive by the nobility in their prisons. At a later date, brainless idiots will take these as divine utterances. This quatrain has been connected to the French Revolution. In 1789, the people of France rose up, and the revolution began with the storming of the Bastille, a French fortress that was used as a prison. The enslaved could be the peasant class that rebelled due to being oppressed for so long by the French nobility. Some have even suggested that the brainless idiots may refer to approximately 17,000 people who were beheaded during the Reign of Terror. Historical Event 3. The lost thing is discovered. Hidden for many centuries, Pasteur will be celebrated almost as a godlike figure. This is when the moon completes her great cycle. But by other rumors he shall be dishonored. This quatrain is a little clearer than the others as it refers to a person by the name of Pasteur. Therefore, most attribute this quatrain to the French chemist and microbiologist Louis Pasteur, who lived in the 19th century. He proved that microorganisms cause fermentation, supporting the germ theory of disease. His work also led to pasteurization and the creation of the first vaccines for rabies and anthrax. In 1995, Gerald R. Geisen, science historian, published a book entitled The Private Science of Louis Pasteur, accusing Pasteur of stealing another scientist's findings and claiming them as his own to make his anthrax vaccine. This may be what the "by other rumors he shall be dishonored" could refer to. It's worth mentioning that in France, Pasteur is a fairly common last name, so Nostradamus might have just gotten lucky. Or he could have hedged his bets that someone with the last name Pasteur would eventually do something noteworthy. Historical Event 4. There are typically 2 quatrains attributed to this event in history. From the depths of the west of Europe, a young child will be born of poor people. He who by his tongue will seduce a great troop, his fame will increase toward the realm of the east. And beasts ferocious with hunger will cross the rivers. The greatest part of the battlefield will be against Hister. Into a cage of iron will the Great One be drawn, when the child of Germany observes nothing. These quatrains have been connected to Adolf Hitler and the rise of the Nazis. Nostradamus interpreters note that Hitler was born to poor parents in Western Europe, and that the future Führer used his tongue to convince a large percentage of the German population to join his cause. The Nazis eventually allied with Japan in the East. Or perhaps this part of the quatrain refers to the Nazi push across the Eastern Front into the Soviet Union. Many also believe that Hister was just a misprint and that Nostradamus meant Hitler, which would make that second quatrain eerily accurate. A different interpretation is that Hister could refer to the Latin name for the Danube River, Ister. The connection here would be that Adolf Hitler was born only a few miles from the Danube. Historical Event 5. The ancient task will be completed. From on high evil will fall on the great man. A dead innocent will be accused of the deed. The guilty one will remain in the mist. This one is not as cut and dry as the quatrains associated with some other historical events. Many Nostradamus interpreters attribute this quatrain to the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Obviously, one would need to first believe that the murder of a U.S. president was part of a bigger conspiracy before the quatrain would make any sense. From on high refers to the gunshots that were fired from an elevated position and struck JFK. Even though there are copious amounts of evidence to support the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald was the gunman who shot the president, and he acted alone, Oswald himself was assassinated before facing trial, and in interviews leading up to his death, he claimed that he was being framed. The lines, "a dead innocent will be accused of the deed, the guilty one will remain in the mist," makes sense if we're to believe that there was another, more sinister entity involved in the assassination of JFK. If this is the case, then Nostradamus' prediction seems to fit the events that unfolded on November 22, 1963. Historical Event 6. The sky will burn at 45 degrees. Fire approaches the great new city. By fire he will destroy their city. A cold and cruel heart. Blood will pour. Mercy to none. This is perhaps the most famous Nostradamus prediction in the modern era. It's been claimed that this quatrain foretold the events of September 11, 2001, when terrorists flew two Boeing 767s into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. The first line that mentions 45 degrees may be referencing the city's relatively close proximity to the 45th parallel, although it is worth noting that New York City is actually located at a latitude of 40.73 degrees north, so it would have made more sense for Nostradamus to reference something a little closer to 40 degrees than 45 degrees. Nostradamus interpreters also equate the great new city to New York, and a cold, cruel heart to Osama bin Laden. If nothing else, these examples introduce the way Nostradamus' prophecies are structured and how their vagueness allows for many interpretations of each quatrain. Let's now explore some predictions that have yet to come true and what they might mean for the future of humanity and the planet. Unfortunately for all of us, Nostradamus rarely made any positive predictions. Much of what he penned were warnings of events that would cause bloodshed or lead to doomsday. Let's start with a prophecy that's been predicted for 2024. Like the previously discussed quatrains, the predictions that Nostradamus enthusiasts make for this year are a little vague, but could point to some disastrous consequences. One line that many people keep referring to could suggest the outbreak of a conflict between two major world powers. Nostradamus wrote, "Red adversary will become pale with fear, putting the great ocean in dread." Some have suggested that this could be a warning of a coming war between China and NATO. The red refers to the People's Republic, while the Great Ocean could refer to a conflict in the Pacific. Scientists, however, have been warning the world about the consequences of climate change for decades. However, Nostradamus predicts that in 2024, some of these warnings may come to fruition in serious ways. In one of his prophecies, he writes, "The dry earth will grow more parched, and there will be great floods when it is seen." This could allude to an increase in droughts along with a rise in sea level, or more major floods in general. To be fair, these consequences of climate change have already been happening. In 2023, it was the warmest year on record, with numerous flooding events and wildfires as a result of droughts. It's not unreasonable to think that 2024 could be just as bad, if not worse, as the planet continues to warm. It's hypothesized that Nostradamus also predicted the death of Pope Francis in 2024. The quatrain that's referred to for this prediction is, "Through the death of a very old pontiff, a Roman of good age will be elected. Of him it will be said that he weakens his see, but long will he sit and in biting activity." Pope Francis was born on December 17, 1936, making him 88 years old in 2024. This would mean he would be very old for someone living in Nostradamus' day, when the life expectancy was somewhere in the mid-60s. As for who the Roman of good age is, it's unclear, so only time will tell if there will be a shift in the papal see in 2024. We'll now fast forward in time to the year 2027, when Nostradamus predicts two nations will go to war, a catalyst that could lead to a much bigger conflict that could end the world. In century number 6, which refers only to the 6th group of 100 quatrains, not a specific year, Nostradamus writes, "In the islands where 5 rivers flow into one, by the crescent of the great Chiron Selin, The fury of one man will float on the mist, 6 will escape, hidden in a load of linen. This quatrain has been claimed to predict a war between India and Pakistan. The crescent referred to in the second line could refer to an Islamic connection and the tensions that have been present ever since the partitioning of Hindu-majority India and Muslim-majority Pakistan. Then there's the fact that the Punjab region between the two nations roughly translates to 5 rivers, which is mentioned in the first line. Therefore, it's been hypothesized that a conflict will break out in Punjab between the Hindus of India and the Muslims of Pakistan. The mentioning of the fury of one man could mean that there will be an aggressive leader in the region who will be the catalyst for the war in 2027. Some think Chiron Selin is a reference to Charon, the ferryman who carries souls across the river Styx. In this circumstance, perhaps the quatrain is warning of a massive war that will keep Charon busy by ferrying souls as people die due to war. The 6 will escape is claimed to be a reference to Greek and Roman times, where the number 6 is associated with random chance, such as in the roll of a die. In this case, Nostradamus could simply be saying that either the war will be started by a random incident, or that the likelihood of war between India and Pakistan in 2027 could go either way. A more disturbing prediction is made for 2028. This quatrain is found in century number 4 of Les Prophecies. It says, "When Venus is covered by the sun, shapes will be concealed beneath its splendor. Mercury, with its fire, will expose them. They will be misused in war." What makes this quatrain so unnerving is that some suggest it could prophesize the first war to be fought with clones or genetically altered humans. The lines in this particular prophecy relate to alchemy, which at the time of Nostradamus was what we would consider chemistry today. Yes, many alchemists were in search of mystical objects such as the Philosopher's Stone that could turn lead into gold, but a lot of real science was being done as well. There's also the fact that Nostradamus viewed alchemy as not just about turning things into gold, but to him, the Philosopher's Stone would unlock the knowledge needed to advance medicine. This belief was likely influenced by his time as a doctor. The combination of symbolism disguised as the names of different planets and their associated gods has led some to believe that the Philosopher's Stone and alchemical practices will be misused in war in some way. Due to the advancement of genetic engineering, especially with technologies such as CRISPR, it's not out of the realm of possibility that by the end of the decade, human modifications, whether ethical or not, could become more mainstream. If certain militaries adopt an alteration of the human genome or even cloning, it could lead to the next major conflict being fought between genetically modified soldiers, or at least this is what some Nostradamus enthusiasts believe. Another Century 4 quatrain may be pointing to science going too far and causing catastrophe on a global scale. For this prophecy, Nostradamus writes, "The sun is hidden, eclipsed by Mercury. It will take second place in the sky. Hermes will be eaten by Vulcan. The sun will be seen pure, gleaming, and fair." At first glance, this quatrain seems to be saying that the planet Mercury will block out the sun. However, Mercury is much too small to cover any significant amount of the sun from Earth's perspective. When Nostradamus wrote the word Mercury, he most likely used it as an allusion to alchemy or science. Therefore, many believe that the sun being eclipsed by Mercury actually means that science will cause the sun to be blotted from the sky. Unfortunately, there's some very scary technology that already exists that could do this at the expense of everyone and everything on Earth. The first nuclear explosion was detonated by U.S. scientists on July 16, 1945, at Alamogordo bombing range in New Mexico. At this very instant, the atomic age began. Today, militaries around the world have much larger and more powerful nuclear weapons than the one detonated at the Trinity test site. Nuclear weapons have the ability to eject huge quantities of dust and particles into the atmosphere. If nuclear war broke out between major powers, the debris kicked up into the atmosphere could literally block out the sun. To bystanders, each detonation would approximately be 800 to 900 times brighter than the sun, thereby making the sun second place in the sky. After the bomb stopped falling, the amount of sunlight reaching the planet would be reduced due to the debris in the atmosphere, which could cause temperatures across the planet to drop. Instead of shining brilliantly in the sky, the sun would be gleaming and fair, but not as brilliant as it once was. Unfortunately for you and about everyone else on the planet, it's been suggested that the prophecy will come true in about 5 years or in 2029. If the previous quatrain doesn't come true, Nostradamus has another prediction for the following year. He's convinced that something is going to happen to the sun in our sky, as he writes again in Century 4. "More than 11 times the moon will not want the sun, each augmenting and declining by degree, placed so low that little gold will be seen while sowing, so that after famine the discovery of the secret will be lost." The prophecy goes back to the discovery of the Philosopher's Stone in the years prior. However, this time, Whatever technology or advancement that had been previously discovered will be lost. It appears that this catastrophe is not predicated on human action but will happen due to a natural phenomenon that'll plunge the planet into darkness and cause humanity to lose the Philosopher's Stone. Whatever that may be, Nostradamus interpreters who read this literally suggest that there will be a cosmic event that results in the moon or another celestial body interfering with the interaction between the Earth and the Sun. Obviously, this would be disastrous. A more likely scenario, but one that still might be as devastating, could be an asteroid impact that has a similar effect to the nuclear holocaust discussed before by kicking up a gigantic amount of debris into the atmosphere, blocking the view of both the moon and the sun from the Earth's surface. This would lead to famine, along with the entire collapse of civilization as we know it. Nostradamus enthusiasts have suggested that the discovery of the secret will be lost refers to the forgetting of scientific advancements up until this point in history, as the event would throw the entire planet back into the Dark Ages. This next quatrain is an odd one and is slated to happen in the year 2032. For this prediction, Nostradamus prophesizes, "A time will come when meat gives way to fish. Communal law will go against the people. The old order will fight hard and then be ousted. The will of the people will be repulsed." Let's break this quatrain down one line at a time. The first seems to suggest that there will be a reduction in meat consumption. Some have proposed this might actually be a shift towards vegetarianism. But if we're to take the line literally, it seems that pescatarianism will be the diet of the future. However, the next series of lines is the most concerning. Communal law will go against the people. Seems to mean that this new diet will be forced upon the people. So some form of government will step in and pressure the populace to give up meat, such as poultry, beef, and pork, and replace it with fruits, veggies, and fish. The old order will fight hard and then be ousted, most likely refers to democracy due to the fact that the next line in the quatrain suggests that the people once had a voice in these types of decisions, but no longer do. This quatrain alone does not tell us exactly which democratic nation will fall victim to this dietary oppression. That being said, we'll soon uncover exactly where these events will occur. To be clear, this is all based on the premise that we're taking the quatrain literally. Some have suggested that this quatrain does not only refer to diets, but instead Nostradamus used "meat gives way to fish" as a blanket statement to warn that in 2032 all freedoms will be taken away and that the world will look more like George Orwell's dystopian future in 1984 than what we have today. Luckily, Nostradamus also predicts that the oppression of the people will only last for 2 years. This is because a quatrain found in century number 7 sets the groundwork for a later prediction that will bring the power back to the people. The first quatrain says, "Trickery will reign, the army will be stripped, an obsession with class, spying given free rein. False friends will unite, hatred once quiescent will be reawakened." Basically, what some have interpreted this quatrain to mean is that by 2033 a resistance will have formed through a series of spy networks, and they'll erode the dictatorship from within. The "false friends will unite" line could refer to people of different political persuasions who once fought with one another coming together to undermine the reign of whoever's in charge. This will all lead to a quatrain in century 2, which not only talks of revolution but also gives us the country where this oppressive dictatorship will occur. This quatrain states the following: "The senseless anger of the furious war will cause brothers to unsheathe their knives across the table. Driven apart, wounded, prying. The pride-driven duel will hurt France." We finally know that the dictatorship that'll force a strict diet on the population will happen in France. This is not surprising, as most of Nostradamus' life was spent in France, and many of his predictions likely concern the nation or Europe in general. The lines in this prediction could mean that the French people would take back their nation from whoever was oppressing them, and everyone would live happily ever after. However, there is a much more sinister reading of this whole series of quatrains that might spell trouble for the European continent as a whole. It has been suggested that this series of quatrains does not refer to a dictator oppressing the rights of the French people, but instead they're in reference to mandates by the European Union. The senseless anger in the first line might be about other members of the European Union getting upset at the people of France for pushing back against laws they do not agree with. This disagreement might also cause a division within France itself, kind of like what happened with Brexit. But on a much bigger and bloodier scale, France could declare war in a pride-driven duel to break away from the EU. This could lead to a wider conflict in Europe, all because the French people didn't want to eat less meat. All of the prophecies discussed should make one thing very clear: all of Nostradamus' predictions were vague and could be applied to multiple situations and contexts. For example, many quoted several Nostradamus predictions in 2012 as evidence the world would end, and yet here we are. What it comes down to is that Nostradamus and his prophecies should be taken with a grain of salt. And if you're trying to predict the future, the vaguer you are, the better chance you'll be right eventually. This brings us to the question, could Nostradamus' future prophecies discussed in this video ever come true? The answer is probably not, and here's why. Nostradamus was not a dumb man. He knew that his notoriety and fame were contingent on his prophecies seeming to be accurate. Therefore, he filled his quatrains with predictions and symbolism that connected to different forms of mysticism and could be interpreted in several different ways. This means that any given quatrain could have several different meanings depending on whether the reader interprets Nostradamus' words literally, metaphorically, or symbolically. The need to be right or appear to be right at least some of the time also drove Nostradamus to keep his prophecies from being too precise. This is a very common tactic with psychics, fortune tellers, and prophets. The vaguer a prediction is, the more likely it can be applied to a random event in the future. Basically, being vague and using symbolism gave Nostradamus plausible deniability while allowing him to claim credit if an event even remotely resembled one of his prophecies. What it really comes down to is that every time someone claims that Nostradamus' predictions have come true, they're interpreting a quatrain to fit a specific situation, instead of the other way around. Therefore, perhaps Nostradamus wasn't actually an all-seeing prophet, but instead, modern enthusiasts are just really good at finding connections between random words written over 500 years ago and current events. It's also important to remember that each time someone translates Nostradamus from French of his day to modern English, German, Chinese, or any other language, their translation differs slightly from others who are translating the exact same words. This creates a game of telephone from the past to the present, and likely has altered the meanings of many of Nostradamus' words and phrases. It should also come as no surprise that many of Nostradamus' predictions were about natural disasters or conflicts between nations, as these types of events are inevitable. Earthquakes, volcanoes, large storms, they'll always happen, so it was a safe bet for Nostradamus to make predictions about them. Countries will almost certainly continue to go to war with one another, at least for the foreseeable future. So it made perfect sense for Nostradamus to make vague predictions about these types of events, as it was only a matter of time before they would happen. Although Nostradamus may have written that an oppressive government in the future will force the people of France to change their diet, the discovery of the Philosopher's Stone will lead to a new age of warfare, and the sun will be blotted from the sky, it's highly likely that these things will not happen exactly the way he predicted them, and that is, if they even happen at all. Do humans have the ability to modify DNA or cause the end of the world via nuclear holocaust? Yes. Did Nostradamus write a bunch of vague, mystical lines that could match up with the current events? Also, yes. Did a man from the 1500s predict historical and future events with exquisite detail? We'll let you be the judge of that. Now check out insane ways people are preparing for doomsday, or check out events that will cause the end of the world.